Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builders Supply. This video is to bring you a closer look at the IVES. This is their part number 70A-W is what it is. This is a hinge pin doorstop. And hinge pin doorstops are pretty typical and common items that have been around for decades. And they're used primarily in residential applications as a very inexpensive means by which to make an attempt to limit the door's maximum degree of opening. I say make an attempt because they're really not a dead stop. They're really not a piece of equipment that's going to positively ensure and guarantee the door will stop there. It won't in all instances, and many it could be problematic. And hinge pin door stops are really a piece of hardware used when it's the least worst of all possible options when it comes to controlling a door. So anyway, let's take a look at it. I have one removed from the packaging. You'll note that there are two rubber bumpers, a bushing, and then the business end of the unit here. Here's the business end. That's just a piece of white powder-coated aluminum. Your hinge pin will come down and ride through here. This gold bolt, this zinc dichromate or whatever it is, I don't even think it's steel. Oh, it is. That's aluminum. That's steel. That's how you set the adjustment, by threading this. Okay, one of your two caps, and this part number is an 09-310, and that is linked to down below this video. Forgive me, it's not an 09-310. That part number is WSPART.1075 is what that is. Well, that's according to the manufacturer. I was just confirming that it's a WSPART.1075. It's very close to the 09-310, which is the replacement tip for the 69 series, and I can see now that they are different. This is a little bit taller than the 69. So you get two rubber bumpers, and they're just going to fit, sorry about the noise, over these ends. They snap on. They're available as replacement products. They do fatigue with time, and you'll be able to set that degree however you thread this. Now, there's a bushing that's involved, and that bushing is to help you install this down onto the type of diameter, I should say, of the hinge pin that you have. So the ID of the stop without the bushing is 0.309, so basically 5/16. If we put that bushing in, it's going to bring that ID to 0.245. So basically a 1/4 inch or 5/16. I had a client one time come in and order some Hager, well, let's just say in this case they were IVES 5 BB1HW, or whatever their part number is for a heavyweight. 5 BB1 HW, a heavyweight hinge. And he says, I need a hinge pin doorstop. And I says, you can't put a hinge pin doorstop on a heavyweight hinge. He's like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, the hole is not big enough for the hinge pin on a heavyweight hinge. He's like, oh, don't worry, I'm going to drill it out. He did. I don't know how that worked long term, but anyway, you get the concept. So it'll really take hinge pins diameter about 1/4 or 5/16, residential or standard weight hinges. Okay. Now we can get the concept here of what we would be dealing with in terms of a, absolute maximum degree of stop that's being involved here. If I held that relatively flat, we can just gauge on here that that's probably going to be, 120 degree perhaps, something in that range. And so what I'm saying is, this is the door, and as the door opens, it will push this part of the tip onto the face of the frame. So maybe about 120 degree. And if I take that and thread it all the way out, okay, I'm going to be able to limit that quite substantially to less than 90. probably somewhere in the 80 or 75 degree opening. Okay. So what happens is you drive the pin out. These are generally installed in the top position. I've seen them in the bottom position. I would think that you would probably want them in the top position. I would think more of the mass of the door is going to come bare on the bottom hinge location. Drive the pin out. Bushing, you'll use it or not. You might even have to clean that out a little bit. This has been powder coated. That whole assembly goes down. Now, keep in mind, this is going to prevent your hinge pin from now going all the way down through the barrel to the thickness of that knuckle. And it's not substantial, but it is something that does change the dynamics, and it's almost 3/8 of an inch. Really shouldn't cause you a problem. I've never heard of it being a problem. And then you'll basically decide what your degree of stop will be. And I say air quotes because this will compress ever so slightly. Okay, so be mindful of that. Now, why, in the first part of the video is probably clear that I'm not a fan of these. And the reason I'm not a fan is because I've had clients come in and tell me that they've had some major damage done. I had one client send me a picture where it was a hollow core door and someone fell into the door and literally ruptured the face of the door veneer. I had another client tell me that what happened was the door was pushed so severely that when the door was pushed open, this point making contact with the casing forced the casing to come off and was damaged and maybe even cracked. It was so severe. So these are not really, they're certainly not going to handle any sort of high volume or abusive applications. Now, what would you use? Well, what you would use could be, and IVES makes them, are overhead stops. Her sister company, Glenn Johnson, manufactures a piece of equipment called an overhead stop or an overhead stop and holder. Just simply think of a track system, a slide track system. You've got part of it on the header, part of it on the door, and that slide track system will absolutely limit hold open, friction, dead stop, spring cushion sort of stop doors. So that's the proper equipment. You would never see a hinge pin door stop on a commercial door except for that one fella. So be mindful that there is the right hardware for this. So an application where you would really want to use an overhead stop versus a hinge pin holder is you have a powder room. It's so small that the door can really only open to about 80 degrees before it will hit the commode behind the door, and it's a French door, and there is opaque glass that's there. You would not want to push that door too far into the commode, breaking a piece of glass. The fact of the matter is the hinge pin door stop really something that can be counted on to provide that sort of safety? It's not, at the end of the day. And an overhead stop would be the ideal item. People don't use them because they cost a lot more. They aren't just a few dollars, a cup of coffee, really. And when they're concealed, they have to be mortised into the header and into the top of the door. So they're not very often used because they're too expensive and too hard to install. And it wasn't planned from the very beginning of the project. So at the end of the project, the contractor, when he comes in and ask for his waiver, he'll say, "Okay, give me baseboard stops, hinge pin stops. Put that on the waiver. I'll be back tomorrow for the signed waiver." So these are literally at the end of the project, or I should say, the thinking of how to stop doors properly is literally when the project is being done. Like sweeping is being done. Closing is tomorrow. So let's switch to the screen view and take a look at some supporting documentation on this hinge pin stop. Okay, now this is the item that we are looking at. Now they've told us that they're going to go from 85 to 105 degree. My just eyeballing it did basically say maybe 75 or 80 degree to 120 degree, but right in that range. Okay. For use on hinge doors where installation of a standard door stop is not desirable or it's not possible. Designed for narrow trim installation. Okay, and it's going to be a reference to, you know, the vertical axis of pivoting, and where, when that gets pushed open, that will make contact with your trim. Removable bushings will accommodate a 1/4 or 5/16. High quality rubber bumpers, which can be ordered here as standalone products. Made from solid brass, aluminum, or epoxy coated aluminum. We'll talk about that in a moment. This one's made of aluminum in a painted white finish. There is a link to the installation instructions here. This document likely goes back to the 80s, for sure the 90s. That's for sure. Not much to see here. You know, pull that hinge, pop that hinge pin out, or push it out with a center punch, and then use the bushing or don't and drive that back down. Be real careful. That door will have a tendency to sag a little bit when you pull that top hinge pin out. So you might want to have somebody help hold the door up while you're pushing that back down. Okay. There's also a link to the product brochure, and when we click on that, we're going to get to 2 or 3 pages worth of product brochure. This is the 69 doorstop. That's by far the most common that I see. And I would, when people say they want the heavy-duty hinge pin stop, they mean the 69. We sell far more of these than any other hinge pin stop. Different finishes. Takes a different replacement tip as well. That's the 09-310. Now, to make matters confusing, on the 70, depending on the base material, it will look like this or it will look like this. When it's made of aluminum, it'll look like this one. Okay, and these are the finishes in aluminum. In the brass, it'll look like this one because it's a cast brass. Very economical solution for use on low-frequency, lightweight, residential 3.5-inch or 4-inch hinged doors. You could put one on a 4.5-inch. Probably going to have to ream that hole out a little bit. White rubber and nylon tips. The 70A 716 will ship with a black rubber tip. Now, I've never heard of the 09-310. What I was about to say was I've never heard of the replacement bumper, the WSPART.1075. Never heard of that available in black. I don't see that it is. I have the price list pulled up here, and yeah, I don't see it listed in black, but I'm going to reach out to the manufacturer and ask if indeed it is, and we'll update. Black happens to be the very popular new finish nowadays. Okay, so the different finishes that it is available in, you know, bright brass, satin brass, antique brass, satin bronze, oil rub bronze, polished nickel, satin nickel, polished chrome, satin chrome, zinc, dark Venetian bronze, black, and white. I would really think that they would make black tips for those black bumpers. So, again, if you have a brass base model, it's going to look like this one, so be mindful of that. This pivot point rotates to accommodate the different openings. As we scroll through the last page, you'll see the number 72 and the 73. This apparently has a larger bushing diameter because it will accommodate a 4.5-inch hinge. I don't see the 72 very often. I don't recall having ever seen the 73. So they're uncommon. The way that these work is they just push flat against the face of the door, which might be desirable if you expect to have someone making a lot of contact. You might want more surface area onto the face of the door. So very handy document. Now there's a link here to the manufacturer's page, and as you click on that, you'll be able to open up the manufacturer's page, where you can view not only all of the IVES products that we sell, but a link to the manufacturer's website, as well as a link to the full product catalog, which is here. Speaking of catalogs for fun, if you wanted to see what IVES was making in 1896 or 1904, yes, there are catalogs here that are well over 100 years old. IVES, the name was really far more synonymous with window hardware and brass, high-quality brass builders hardware, like shutter bars and mortise bolts and a variety of piece parts for doors. But window hardware, sash lifts, sash locks, things of that nature. And if you dive into either one of these books, you're going to see mostly window hardware. Let's wrap up this video on camera. Okay, in conclusion, nice quality item from IVES, typical residential builder's hardware material. The name IVES is by far still synonymous with some brass builder's hardware, but as you tour through their catalog, you'll see that they're not even remotely close to the company that they were just a few decades ago, meaning you can buy continuous hinges, pin and barrel hinges, architectural hinges. You can buy pivots. And actually, speaking of pivots, if you use commercial pivots and you are probably therefore familiar with the names in the industry or the name, you want to take a look at IVES. Their installation instructions and template are written in a far more accessible sort of approach. So if you're new to pivots, ease into thinking about pivot hardware using the IVES supporting documentation, and that will get you perhaps warmed up better to it. They don't have every single dimension under the sun on there, which makes things a little bit easier to review. But as you go through that, you'll see flat goods, kick plates, push and pull hardware, ladder pulls, a variety of different products. So I would review their catalog. They're under the Allegion umbrella, which means that their sister companies will be Schlage, LCN, Von Duprin, Glenn Johnson, I said it earlier, Zero, Doramatic, Falcon, the old name of Monarch, etc. Any questions on the 70-A hinge pin doorstop or any other IVES product, please feel free to reach out to us. And thank you.